happy Monday. I hope everybody had a wonderful weekend and are ready to take on this week. We're starting off this week by taking some notes. We're going to be looking at a new critical thinking strategy this week. We're going to be talking about bias. And to start off, we're going to be taking some notes. You can find those notes under the classwork tab of the Google Classroom. They're labeled CE Notes 921. If you open it up, you will see the link for my YouTube channel as well as the Google Slides notes for you to take. When you look for this video, please make sure that you are watching the correct one. This is the one for current events from Monday, September 21st. So if we open up the slides, like usual, you will see the red text boxes are here for you to fill in the words. The words that you will be looking for today are bold and blue. So you'll just click this red text box, and when you see the word, you can type in whatever needs to be filled in, and do that for the other blanks. If at any point you need to pause or re-watch the video to get all of the words and make sure that you are understanding all of the important information, feel free to do so. We're going to go ahead and get started. So what is media bias? Bias is showing an opinion about something that is not based on all of the facts. It is favoring some ideas or people over others. It is prejudice, preferring one thing, person, or group when compared with another, usually in a way that is considered to be unfair. There are three types of media bias you may see in the media: bias by omission, bias by placement, and bias by spin. The first, bias by omission, is when important information is omitted or left out of a story. There are two types of bias by omission. The first is avoiding coverage. Coverage is publishing media messages about a story or event. When the media avoid coverage of an important event, it is probably bias by omission. For example, if a serious problem happens at a national bank, but there is no news about it, this would be an example of bias by omission, specifically avoiding coverage. The other type of bias by omission is the one-sided story. One-sided means only one point of view is presented. By only showing one side, the news is not objective, fair, or based on facts. And in order to be fair, a news story should show more than one point of view. The second type of bias is bias by placement. Bias by placement happens when stories that are important for our daily lives don't receive important placement in media messages. It can also happen when unimportant stories get important placement in media messages. Important placement often means that it is at the top of the page or at the beginning of a news broadcast. There are two reasons bias by placement can happen. First is the role of the editor. An editor is a person whose job it is to correct and revise writing so it can be published. They are in charge of the newspaper. They can also decide where stories are placed on a page or in a broadcast. Because they believe which stories are featured at the beginning of a video or at the top of the page, the editor basically tells us how important a story is. So if one editor thinks it is more important to talk about coronavirus than about the hurricane, you will see the coronavirus article at the top of the page. However, if an editor believes that the hurricane is more important, they might put that at the top. And so it can impact how important you believe the story is. The second reason is sensationalism. Sensationalism means using news media messages to entertain people instead of informing them about events that are important to their daily lives. Stories about celebrities, trends, or pop culture can become very popular very quickly and on social media. So you learn even more when you click and check Twitter and Facebook. The placement of this story is different types of media tells us that it is a very important story. But if we stop for a moment and ask ourselves, is this story important for my daily life? We might say no. So sensationalism can direct our attention away from important news topics like the global pandemic, global warming, the hurricanes, wildfires, other things, the election, other things that are going on, by distracting us with news about, keeping up with the Kardashians ending, or new songs that are coming out, or other TV shows where we might be less inclined to look at the actual news stories. The last type of bias by spin, means that spin gives a positive or negative point of view about a subject in order to change the opinion of the audience. And this can happen in two ways. The first is using pundits. A pundit is a person who has a lot of knowledge and experience about a subject and gives opinions about these subjects in public. It can be hard to ignore people who are considered experts, but whenever a media message interprets or analyzes a situation in the world, instead of presenting objective information, it is bias. The second way is using words with negative or positive connotation. Connotation means the feeling that we have about a word instead of its dictionary definition. When the media uses words that people feel negatively about, it can influence the way they view a story. So, for example, the house on the left you would call an old home, and it probably gives you this idea of this creepy old house. However, if we said this vintage home, you might think of something like this. Both old and vintage mean the same thing, but we get different feelings when we hear the word old versus when we hear the word vintage. So old has a negative connotation, while vintage has a more positive connotation. How do we overcome this bias? When you think you have found a biased news source, ask yourself what points of view are being omitted or left out from this message. Try to identify the multiple perspectives or see if there are multiple sources listed. If not, you may need to check multiple news sites to get a clear picture of all sides. Another thing you can do is ask yourself, how important is this story or event for my daily life or society in general? If something is very important to your life but doesn't receive important placement in the media, then it is time to start searching. Finding other media sources, especially on social media, that give important placements to stories that matter to you. You can also ask yourself, does this message want me to have a positive or negative opinion about this topic? We want to see objective language which is based on facts and not opinions. If a media message doesn't use neutral connotations, or if it seems to be saying you should feel a certain way, then you should stop for a moment and think. Make sure your opinion about this situation is your own. It is perfectly fine to agree or disagree with media message, but your opinion about the topic should be your own choice, not the choice of the media message. However, make sure to check your own bias too. Your goal should be to get a complete picture of events in the world, not just to consume media that already agrees with your point of view. If we are not careful, we could accidentally surround ourselves with media sources that all share the same biases, which is called an echo chamber. Remember that bias can affect your decisions about how to act in the world. You must be an active consumer of media and practice good media literacy to overcome bias and make good choices. at this point again, if you need to rewatch or revisit any of the parts of the video to fill in all of the blanks, please do so. If you have any questions, please message me. I will be happy to help you. Do not forget to complete your exit ticket going over this information. Use your notes to help you complete the exit ticket. You can also rewatch this video to help you complete this exit ticket. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I will talk to you later.